All right, everybody, we're live here on the Empty the Bench Facebook page, along with Tom Albano. I'm Nick Morgasen. We've had this guest on before. We really enjoyed talking to him. He's a really good guy, and he agreed to come back on with us. Jesse Rogers of ESPN and ESPN 1000 is joining us, covering the world of baseball. Jesse, thanks for coming back on with us.
Sure, good to be with you guys. What's up?
So now that baseball has returned, we have a deal, we're happy, we can hopefully get the sport back. What did you think of the deal now that we're back here?
It wasn't much of a deal. I mean, I think the beautiful ending of this whole thing, not so much beautiful, but I guess if you're observing and you just like the irony of it all, I get the players rejecting 60 games, which is what Manfred ends up implementing, just cracks me up to no end. The part that's sad, and I blame the owners for, is they're only playing 60 games. If this is done right, it could have been 80 or 90. Going back to the late March agreement, that thing was written poorly. The fact that they couldn't agree on what they thought they agreed on in late March is kind of pathetic, to be honest, for a big business like that. So, it just was kind of silly to me how they had this disagreement throughout the whole process and then end up at 60 games, which is not the amount of a season should be. It's just, especially when they could have started a month ago, even though they might end up not finishing here. That's a whole other story. So a lot of silly, stupid sort of stuff, but I find it very interesting that they end up at 60 games, which is what the players rejected at the end.
So more specifically, are there any clear winners or losers now that we have this deal that's been agreed to and baseball apparently is back?
Well, no, there's no clear winners or losers, but in this sort of context, the owners ended up winning because they went from possibly playing 100 games all the way down to 60, which we know they wanted. They wanted a shorter schedule. But they don't win because they didn't get expanded playoffs and some other things. So there are no winners or losers, but ultimately the players always end up losing in these situations. And they end up doing that here because they're the ones that have to jump through all these hoops to play, and they only get paid for 60 games.
Now, let's talk about the media side, since you're very well versed on that side of the game. So with all these rules, they're talking about the media having certain access and being allowed to do certain things. How does this affect? Are you going to be traveling to the games? How is that going to work?
Remains to be seen. I probably will. I'll probably drive to a lot of games. I'm in Chicago, so that's within driving distance of a lot of places. St. Louis, Minneapolis, Milwaukee, Cincinnati, Cleveland, Detroit, all within a 5-hour radius. That's what I think will happen. I'll drive to a few games. I mean, we'll see where the world is a month, 2 months from now. It's ever changing. So I wouldn't rule out getting on a plane, but mostly I'll go to Wrigley Field or the South Side for Sox games. And, that's the good thing about being in a city with two teams, AL and NL. I can see a lot, but I'll probably mostly be based at Wrigley Field and maybe some road games in the area.
How do your colleagues feel about all the social distancing policies in effect?
I've had to wear masks in stores and things, and, it's for 5 or 10 minutes at a time. Now I have to wear one for hours at a time in a press box. Probably not the most fun. We won't be able to socialize like we used to, similar to the players. We're all going to be socially distanced and, just weird things. We have to bring our own food. It'll just be kind of just punching a clock. Baseball used to be fun, right? It's a fun sport to be around, but now it's going to be about punching a clock. I think that's for everybody in the game. Maybe there'll be some good competition between the lines, but there's so much rigmarole before and after the games and travel and everything. I just don't think anyone's going to have a ton of fun, but hey, as long as we stay healthy and we're able to all make our living for ourselves and our families, I guess that's what's most important right now.
So I'm sure you saw the reports with Mike Leake of the Diamondbacks and Joe Ross and Ryan Zimmerman of the Nationals, who have officially opted out of the season. Do you see maybe possibly another couple players opting out of the season? And I thought it was interesting that there's a twist on the rules that if you opt out, say you're a healthy player and you opt out, you can't come back in. But if you're a player with certain circumstances and you opted out originally, you could come back. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, they just want to draw a line between the people that are high risk and the ones that aren't. If you just choose not to play, I mean, teams have to move on from you. But if you are forced not to play because of health risks, then they give you a little leeway. I think that's the right thing to do. Yeah, you know what? At the end of the day, there will probably be a few more, and they may opt out later on, for all we know. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that healthy players are opting out. Seems like there are some extenuating circumstances with some of these guys. You know, whether it be an underlying condition for a family member or a wife that's pregnant. So, but I'm still surprised that some healthy guys are opting out. I just figured they fought so hard, the union did throughout this thing, that players wouldn't necessarily walk away unless they were forced to. But look, there's 1,200, 1,800, whatever players. I guess a few not showing up shouldn't surprise that many. But I'm a little surprised. I guess I'll be more surprised if some big names opt out after this whole union fight they had with the league. But everyone's got their own situation. So I don't think – I'll say this. I don't think anybody should be criticized for doing anything in this weird summer that we're in. So if they opt out, they opt out.
I mean, funny we bring that all up because Anthony Rizzo is in the high-risk category, and we saw that there are different rules for people who opt out and are at risk and can re-enter as opposed to being fully healthy and just don't want to play. So why is it that players who are afraid health-wise can't really re-enter?
So there's debate whether Anthony Rizzo is a high risk. I looked into it, and I don't think he necessarily is, having cancer a decade ago. I mean, if you're currently going through treatment, that's a different story. But I'm not sure that he is necessarily a high risk situation. That from what I've looked into. But like I said, I just feel like they have to draw a line, guys. I don't want to play, then I want to play, then I don't want to play. Teams need to know from a payroll standpoint and just from a playing standpoint. But look, if you're high risk, you do deserve some leeway, and that's what they're doing here.
Now, the rule book, I'm sure you saw the 100-plus page rule book that came out. This is massive with all the different rules, and I wanted to discuss a little bit because this rule book is massive. So starting with at the stadium, we're seeing short shifts. We're seeing people not allowed to show up until 5 hours before the game, food being wrapped up, utensils, the showers and rosin bags. And what do you make of all these different situations to make social distancing easier?
Yeah, I think a lot of them they'll get used to, but a lot of them they may not. I think the camaraderie aspect is kind of tough in team sports. I mean, these guys are high-fiving, slapping each other on the back all the time. I was just talking to David Ross and the Cubs GM Jed Hoyer today about, walk-off home run. They're going to do some socially distanced dance to celebrate instead of jumping on each other. I mean, the teams that have sort of embrace it and not complain and whine will be better off. I'm not saying they'll play better. Maybe they will, but just mentally they'll be better off. But some things, I don't know how they're going to enforce no spitting, but I'm sure players will do their best. And maybe that's the whole point of this thing. If you just limit some of these things, it'll help. You can't eliminate them all, but try to limit them. One less guy spitting is one less chance of that virus spreading, right? 100 less guys spitting. But that still means 100 might spit. So look, there's no perfect answer here. They're just trying to do the best based on the medical advice. If a doctor says, "Hey, I don't think they should spit," you're going to put it in the protocol, and then you do your best based on that.
Funny enough, we go now to some of the stuff that's going on the field, and you brought up no spitting. Pitchers aren't allowed to lick their fingers before pitches. We did have some rules that were going to be implemented anyways, like the 3-batter limits. The 3-batter minimum, pardon me. We have the universal DH, of course, the extra, the runner starting on second and extra innings. But then we also have things like staying 6 feet apart, including during the national anthem. The fact that balls that are touched by multiple players during a play have to pretty much be thrown away. Everybody in the dugout has to wear masks. Except for the players. And it's funny because it's like what we were just saying before, because teams are working around it, but some of what makes baseball is getting eliminated because of this pandemic. Like the sunflower seeds, pretty much. What's a baseball game without somebody spitting sunflower seeds?
Yeah, it is going to look different, and that's the thing. And the fans that embrace the difference and find the uniqueness in it will like it and enjoy it. and those that are just pushing back on it. Look, I don't like the runner on second base in the 10th inning, but I get it. It's fine. I think, and trust me, I hate being at the ballpark for 6 hours for a game. That gets boring, right? But the idea of 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 inning games, I think is intriguing because how teams recover from that, what kind of depth they have the next day, the next week, the next month, all that is part of a marathon season. But it's a 60-game season, so right off the bat, there is no marathon. It's different, and I'm okay with all the changes that they're making. Teams that embrace it will do better, whether it be, again, in the standings or just mentally handling it all, they'll do better. And I think the good managers will tell them just embrace the change and enjoy the uniqueness of it all.
Talking to Jesse Rogers of ESPN and ESPN 1000. Now, talking about some of the procedures, we've seen this for all the sports. They're going to do 24 to 48-hour COVID tests, blood tests. We've seen all that. We're seeing spring camps starting, and we'll get into something that I thought was interesting as well, which is that they're calling it summer camp or spring camp. People are getting their brains held up in a craze because they're calling it that. But what do you make of all the procedures of trying to make sure everyone is tested properly and that they're healthy enough? And will those players, if they get tested, are they allowed to be replaced?
Oh, yeah, they got to be replaced if they test positive or even have a temperature over 100.4. They're sent home immediately. And this is why they have such large roster pools, up to 60 players that you can bring in and replace 2, 3, 4, 5 at a time if you need to. I think COVID positive tests are a storyline. I think regular injuries are going to be a storyline. It is better to get loose in the summer, so that's good, but still think there'll be hamstring and arm injuries at the same rate or more than regular. And I think guys are going to be a lot more careful in terms of coming back. So there's dual issues there, the COVID issues and then the regular injuries. And initially, teams will not tell you which injured list these guys are going on, but I think it'll become obvious. A guy with a bad ankle will still walk out there for warm-ups potentially. Guy that has COVID won't be seen for weeks on end. So I think we'll figure out who has the positive tests and not.
Just to follow up on Nick's question, what are your thoughts exactly on the whole thing about how it's being called, Spring Training 2.0 is being called the summer camp of sorts, and is actually being sponsored, even though there's not really going to be many spring training games like there is in the normal spring training?
I don't really have much thought. So what if it's called summer camp? What else are you supposed to call it? It's fine. Summer training, I guess you could do whatever. I mean, you call whatever you want. Call it baseball practice until July 23rd. I mean, that's just silly that anybody cares about what it's called. Was there another question? I don't remember.
So moving on now to the travel sort of things. We have everyone has to be masked up as they're traveling. Players and coaches are going to be encouraged to team buses rather than public transportation and Uber and Lyfts. They're going to have specific flight plans. No sharing is going to be allowed. Even trips to the plane's bathrooms are going to be staggered.
Yeah, they may have umpires on team flights even. That'll be interesting. Ring up a guy with a bad call, and then you're on a flight with him.
Oh.
So there's all sorts of weird stuff that's going on. But, teams, that part isn't so weird for the players because they're already in a bubble during the regular season. They take a bus to the plane, and the plane is on a private runway, chartered plane. So think about that. It's not like they're going from commercial to chartered. They already stay in 5-star hotels. Hopefully those hotels are sanitized, but if they're 5-star, they usually are. So the travel isn't going to be that much different. I guess wearing a mask will be different. And if an umpire's on your flight, that would be different.
Now, to get to the end here, and I found this quite interesting as well, kind of the miscellaneous stuff. So like the rain delay theater, which they were talking about to prevent games from lasting as long as they do, they would suspend them after 5 innings or less. Usually you would pick those games up later in the day, but obviously you're not doing that with COVID because you're trying to keep people off the field. Do you see some weird but interesting techniques to make sure we get through this efficiently, but it won't affect the time structure of how this is done?
In terms of the games and stuff? Yeah. I mean, I think that certainly those rain delays will not be lengthy, and they'll just suspend the game and move on. Initially, games are going to be long, though. I mean, at 30-man rosters, switch pitching changes because guys aren't stretched out. I'm hopeful that month into it, by August 1st, or by September 1st, the second month of the season, we see better baseball. Obviously, the rosters will be reduced. So I almost feel like the first month is an extension of spring training. I don't think it'll be the best baseball. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Good weather will help, that unlike April weather. So, but I have my worries about injuries. I have my worries about long games because of pitching changes, and that will take away the enjoyment of watching the game for sure.
I have one follow-up with the trade deadline. So the trade deadline being 1 month after the season starts, is that odd to you in some way, or is that just because of the way the scheduling fell out?
There's not much else you can do, really. I mean, I'm surprised they have trades, to be honest. I would have said just play with the team that you have. Trading your a player and moving his family, if that has to happen mid-season during a pandemic, seems goofy. 2 months, just play with the team you have. I don't know why they're allowing trades, but I guess they are for whatever reasons. I don't think there'll be a lot of them. There might be a few, but I don't think there'll be a lot. Maybe late August, but I don't think initially here we haven't seen any yet. I don't think there's going to be much. So there probably won't be that many.
And I'll just wrap it up with a follow-up of my own, just to sum things up. How do you think fans and players are going to take to the whole, this strange, bizarre baseball season we're going to have with empty stadiums and all these restrictions? And do you think all these restrictions and everything are going to hold up against, the players' desires and against the coronavirus itself?
I mean, I have my doubts that we'll finish. Some people have their doubts we'll even start, other than a few practices. And I mean, it just depends. I mean, what's the world going to look like a month from now? Nobody knows, or less than that, I guess 3 weeks from now when we start up. So I think you have to try to be optimistic, but still have your doubts that it'll actually happen. The NBA and NHL have a little bit of an advantage. They're in these bubbles. Baseball is not at all. Not only that, they have a separate team at training somewhere else. They could be infected. I mean, who knows? So the travel, obviously, that applies to baseball and doesn't apply elsewhere. There's a lot of ways it could go wrong, but you never know. Once they're in their team bubbles, maybe players follow the procedures and everything kind of works on its own. And, I mean, they've come up with a system. Maybe it works, but you got to have your doubts until you actually see it play out.
And you got teams like the Marlins and the Astros and Rangers, the Diamondbacks, who are in these spiked up areas with the coronavirus. Yeah. The Blue Jays, we don't even know if the Canadian government's going to allow them to play in Toronto.
Right. But again, a month from now, it might be all different. They might be safer and then the other hot spots pop up. And that's the problem. It's like a game of whack-a-mole right now. So just got to take it one day at a time and see where these places are, these baseball cities and states. And if it's feasible, the thing is, you're not taking resources away from the regular public anymore. That was the fear in April. The resources aren't being taken away, but can you play while the rest of your city is falling apart and hospitals are filled and all that? I don't know. I'm not sure if the optics look bad or the actual execution won't work. We're all going to find out together.
All right.
Well, that was very informative, Jesse. We learned a lot about what's going on in Major League Baseball, and hopefully we can talk to you along the way as we learn more about this situation. And thanks for being on with us.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Take care.
You too.
Bye.